Hey everybody, Aaron Bishop here with the Bishop's Blurb. In Judaism, we're told that there are 613 laws. Now, this idea of there being 613 laws is actually a relatively modern idea. The first mention of there being 613 laws we actually find in the Mishnah Nezikin. This Mishnah is part of the Babylonian Talmud, and when it tells of the 613 laws, it's actually recording the words of Rabbi Semlai, who was a 4th century rabbi several hundred years after Jesus. And when we read through the entire tractate of the Mishnah, it's actually pretty clear that this rabbi was attempting to use gematria as a metaphor for keeping all of the law. It was intended to be representative, not literal. And yet, if you read through Jewish history, there are countless attempts to codify 613 laws within the Torah. And when we approach the Torah in this way, we discover that this process is fraught with inconsistencies and problems with methodology. Well, as Jews continued to attempt to do this, it wasn't until the 12th century with a rabbi named Maimonides that they finally settled on this is the list of 613 laws. But even then, this list is hotly contested among rabbis. This idea that there are 613 laws, it's an imposition on the text. And this can be seen by comparing various lists of these laws. Do it. Attempt to codify them yourself. You'll find that your list will not match anyone else's list. And no two of these other lists match each other. But if you do this, you'll find that no single one of them mentions Deuteronomy 31:19 in part of the list. This is a law straight from God that says that Israel is supposed to teach their children Deuteronomy 32, Ha'azinu, or we sometimes call it the Song of Moses. This law doesn't exist in these codified versions of the 613 laws. Using just these few facts, there's 100 more that could be applied, but using just these few, we can see that these lists, they're faulty. They're simply tradition, and they're a tradition that has the weight of authority, and that becomes dangerous, in my opinion. Because when we create a list out of the Torah, we turn it into a checklist. Check boxes. When it's turned into a checklist, the thing the human heart wants to do is find out how close we can come to the line without going over. And as long as we don't go over what's on the list, then we're okay. This type of thinking, it's a trap, and it's one that we need to avoid. The New Testament authors, instead, they speak on the laws of the Torah in a different way. They use the Torah as base principles that go beyond the written word, and then they extrapolate truths from these written words. Take 1 Corinthians 9, for example, verses 9 through 10. For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when he treads out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he certainly speak for our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher thresh in hope of sharing the crop. If we treat the law as a list of line items, then yes, it obviously is about oxen that God is concerned about, because that's what the list says. We can ignore every other application of how to use this law. But Paul disagrees. Instead, he finds the underlying principle of caring for those who labor on your behalf, and then he uses that command to prove the point that you need to take care of those who work for you spiritually. In this, we find that the Torah itself was not intended to be reduced to simply a list. Rather, it was to be the foundation from which we can then extrapolate a way of living that goes far beyond what's simply written.